Combine has ground everybody down. Everybody's been infatuated by the New Age or Alex Jones. They've all gone the wrong way. They've either gone left into the arms of the New Age or right into the arms of Alex Jones, both of which are a form of fascism, both of which lead back to the Combine and are put in your in front of you by the Combine to ensnare you. Indeed, the New Age movement was created by the Jesuit Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, S.J., a complete Jesuit movement. Indeed, I'm figuring that the religion slash faith of the New World Order may be some sort of mixture between the New Age movement and Catholicism. A form of Catholicism anyway, because why else would they be keeping the Vatican in place as it is? And indeed, with the Combine having ground everybody down, everybody seems too scared to even talk about or know the truth. Sometimes you hear people talk about the Rothschilds, but they may get it in the wrong context, but just to hear somebody actually talking about that is music to my ears, because the Rothschilds are involved. They're not as powerful as people make them out to be, and Zionism isn't the main problem here. The Jesuit Illuminati psychiatric Combine is the be-all and end-all, basically, of the conspiracy world. But it's okay to go down the wrong rabbit hole. I went down the Rothschild rabbit hole for a long time, but I'm just glad that if I hear anybody speak about the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, for instance, or the Schiffs or the Warburgs, then we could begin speaking, because it does all link. These families are the Knights of Malta. They are bankers who are working for the Jesuits. The Knights of Malta are subordinate to the Jesuits, and the Rothschilds were very important, especially after the suppression of the Jesuits in 1773. The Jesuits had an enormous amount of wealth that they'd gathered during the Paraguayan reductions, and unfortunately they couldn't deposit their money in a Catholic bank, because a Catholic bank would find a way to siphon that money back to the Holy See or to the Spanish and Portuguese empires that had shut down the reductions to begin with, because the Jesuits weren't giving any of the wealth of the reductions to the Spanish and Portuguese empires while they were operating their reductions on their land. They were simply putting it into their own war chest, which was handled by the Pallavacini family and the Farneses, for instance. Thus, we had the beginning of the suppression with Portugal and Spain, and then because of the Gallican movement, we had the suppression in France, and then Austria. These empires wanted to work more on their own, and they saw the Jesuits as aligned with the papacy. But then the papacy suppressed the Jesuits, and now not only were the monarchies of Spain, Portugal, Austria and France the enemies of the Jesuits, the Catholic Church was now the enemy of the Jesuits. And indeed, the Rothschilds were very important, and with the formation of the Bavarian Illuminati, led by Adam Weishaupt and decreed by Lorenzo Ricci, the superior head general of the Jesuit Order, and the head of British intelligence, who was also a Jesuit, William Petty, Marquess of Lansdowne. They created the Bavarian Illuminati, and the Bavarian Illuminati immediately made an alliance with the House of Rothschild, and the House of Rothschild became the bankers of the Jesuit Order. Then their not being Catholic meant that they were worthy bankers for the Jesuit Order, and indeed it was the Rothschilds that took over the economy of Britain, which was the coup de grace, as it were, of the Jesuit colonization of Britain. The Jesuit colonization of Britain took place between 1773 and 1815, and the Rothschilds were pivotal in the final moments, because the Rothschild agents put fake news across from the battlefields of Waterloo that Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo. Thus the stocks and the British trade fell. The Rothschilds bought them all up before the news of Wellington's British victory came to London. The stocks would go up again. By that point, the Rothschilds had brought all the stocks up for the Jesuit Order. Thus, in one swoop, the Rothschilds were able to take over the British economy for the Jesuits. So yes, talk about the Rothschilds. They are so important and have been historically so important to the Combine and the history of the Combine. But you need to get the context correct, as it's not the Rothschilds that are the rulers of the conspiracy. They are not the most powerful family in the world. They have recently married in with the Aldobrandinis, which means they are now within the collection of some of the most powerful families. But even these most powerful families of the Ultra-Aristocracy, the Aldobrandinis, the Estes, Contis, or the Percys, the Cecils, the Welds, they're still not necessarily powerful, because they're not necessarily the most powerful, because the Jesuits exist, and the Jesuits are the intelligence arm, and the intelligence arm are able to blackmail, and they are able to control the ultra-aristocracy, because they are the confessor priests to the ultra-aristocracy, and operate as, and are trained as spies. Thus they are always watching, they are always analyzing. Thus the real power lies with the Combine, and it is the Combine that is able to engineer societies to become as drones, as slaves, to create such institutions as Tavistock, which therefore socially engineer societies in a specific manner. It is the intelligence agencies that do this. For instance, the Jesuits and of course the Illuminati. Once the Jesuits had been suppressed in 1773, the Illuminati immediately began a network of spies all across Europe, and then with the House of Rothschild they added more and more spies. And indeed, of course, there was an alliance with Jacob Frank and his conversion to Catholicism that had occurred during the 1750s, 1760s. He became an alliance with the House of Rothschild, the Sabbatean Frankists, and they added another element of spies to this already burgeoning movement, the Jesuit Combine. And indeed, with the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, a lot of Grand Orient Masonry came under the Illuminati flag, became Illuminized, thus even more spies for the Jesuit Order. The Jesuit Order became more powerful during its suppression than it did when it was active. Thus, once the Jesuits were restored in 1814, they had more power than they ever managed. And indeed, that's why we can question whether or not the Jesuits actually masterminded their own demise, specifically so that they could become the most powerful entity. Because, take it, the Jesuits in 1815, they had not only colonized Britain and now had the British Empire and the British East India Trading Company, they also had the papacy. They had complete control of the papacy, the complete control of the Pope, complete control of the King of Britain also. So, suddenly, this is it. And the Romanoid system continues, all the despotism from the Roman Empire through the Roman Catholic Church. Now we have the Jesuitical shape-shifting Romanoid system. Now that we have the Jesuits Empire, this is the new age of a new Imperium. But what the Jesuits are attempting to do is dull the population, create drones and slaves, and force the world back into complete and utter feudalism, with an ultra-aristocracy ruling, with some kind of visible church, the Vatican mixed with a new age, I don't know what it's going to be, and with the Jesuits mediating. This is how it will be. There will be no real knowledge. It will be technocratic feudalism, basically. Maybe with gulags, who knows. Or it could be worldwide reductions. It could be the Paraguayan reductions as they were, but on a worldwide level. In the Paraguayan reductions, the Jesuits enslaved 200,000 Guarani Indians and pretty much just gave them mass, gave them food, gave them drink, and got them to do all the work within these compounds. They couldn't escape. And they also inserted secret police within the compounds, so there could be no subversion. And this was the pretext for the Soviet Union and the KGB. It was exactly the same. Indeed, the Soviet Union was a Jesuit experiment. That's why, like Stalin, tried with socialism in one country. They could control it in Russia. This is why the Jesuits supported the CIA against communist movements outside of Russia, yet never threatened the Soviet Union. They were okay with the Warsaw Pact. They acceded to Stalin's wish for Eastern Europe. That was okay. Eastern Europe and Russia, that was okay for the experiment. And indeed China for Bertrand Russell's Maoist vision. But nowhere else. The communist revolts in South America, Latin America, Vietnam, the communists won. It was a rare place where they did, but the ones in Latin America and South America were put down by force by the CIA, the American military, and the right-wing death squads, which were funded by CIA cocaine money, all from Georgetown, all dictated from Georgetown University in the tunnels between Georgetown University and the White House. This was the Jesuits who were dictating all of these politics. The whole politics of the Cold War revolved around the Jesuits and their experiment in the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was never powerful enough to threaten the USA. It was simply made out to be so that the Jesuits could keep the military-industrial-pharmaceutical complex going and keep the corporations in the money. And it was an experiment in mind control of keeping the entire population brainwashed as if there was a constant threat from an outside enemy, when the Soviet Union was never powerful enough to threaten the United States anyway. But it was made out that they were, to keep this war going, which is the war on communism, and that's carried on, the war on drugs and the war on terror. This is just endless conflict to keep people in, well, to keep the arms dealers in business and to keep the world in chaos. Order ab Chao, order ab Chao, the Freemason motto, order from chaos. This is what the Jesuits want. They want this chaos and confusion. We need to order our confusion somehow. It's difficult. For instance, we have Father Edmond Walsh, who's mentoring Stalin, and then comes back to America, and in the 50s he's the biggest McCarthyite of them all, even though he's 1 minute, you know, pretty much praising Stalin, as bringing Stalin forth and involving himself in the drawing up of the death list purges with Stalin, his buddy. Then in the 50s, he's best friends with Senator McCarthy and the military-industrial complex against the Soviet Union. So we're having a strange juxtaposition here. The Jesuits like to play games. They enjoy creating dialectics, and they're incredible at it. Nazism and communism were both invented by the Jesuits, and they use them, play them off against each other. Fascism, communism. Nazi Germany against the Soviet Union. It's just Jesuits' war games, all dictated from Georgetown University and Bowood House. That's all it is. Georgetown University in America and Bowood House in Britain. Bowood House, which isn't 2 miles away from where I lived recently. Underneath Bowood House is the MI6 Jesuit war rooms, but nobody knows about that. You go around saying that, everybody will start coming down on you. Spread it, spread it, spread it, spread it, spread it. Get it around, tell everyone. There are tunnels then there going forth from Lake Okabe onto Porton Down, Salisbury Cathedral, Hatfield House, the home of the Cecil family. Cecil family are another Jesuit dynasty. Protestant outwardly, but they're a Jesuit dynasty ever since 1545, the marriage between Pallavacini's and the Cecils. 1545, that marriage, 5 years after the Jesuits were sworn in, because the Jesuits always had their eyes on Britain, just like the Templars had. And indeed, so we have Hatfield House, the home of the Cecils, and then we have Bowood House, the home of the Marquess of Lansdowne, the Pettys, now the Petty Fitzmaurice bloodline, and they have always, for the last 300 years, have been the heads of British intelligence. Indeed, William Petty in 1776, and Lorenzo Ricci, even though supposedly Lorenzo Ricci died in 1775, which is the lie, he lived and went to America and took part in the American Revolution. But Lorenzo Ricci and Adam Weishaupt came up with the Bavarian... Lorenzo Ricci and William Petty came up with the Bavarian Illuminati to be led by Adam Weishaupt. Weishaupt had been specially groomed for that position, and we had the Bavarian Illuminati. And indeed, a lot of the people who joined Weishaupt, indeed Weishaupt came under the codename Spartacus because he was leading a revolution against Rome, because they were attacking the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church now become the Jesuits' enemy. So the Bavarian Illuminati were carrying this out, but a lot of the people who joined the Illuminati initially, von Zwack and von Kaniga, they were more technocratic in their ideals. They wished for a society of savants led by philosophers and scientists. So since 1814 there's kind of been a midway point. The Jesuit order has had more technocratic elements to it, and it's been adding to it and developing in that way. The Jesuit-Illuminati has a balance, and of course there is the psychiatric element. Indeed, the psychiatric element is probably the most nefarious. I'm drugged by 5 different drugs every day. You know, what is it doing to my brain? You know, it's all those school shooters are usually on sort of psychotropic drugs. We're just guinea pigs. They're testing out all this science. This is all Nazi science left over from Operation Paperclip. You know, they're just dulling us or making us. They have something to make you quiet, something to make you scream, something to make you laugh. You know, this is crazy. Big Pharma's making shitloads of money out of it, and nobody gives a shit about us. We get completely schizos. We get completely hammered by society, and we're forced drugged, and then we're isolated. We tell any girl that's schizophrenic they're on a fucking mile. And the psychiatric profession has a lot to answer for. It's unethical, and it's part of the control machine. It's part of the system that wants to make us drones and slaves. And the schizophrenics, you know, usually of high intelligence, so we are the ones who could come together and be more rebellious. That's why they've got us dulled down and try and keep us apart as much as possible. Even within the asylums themselves, they get people they deem to be potentially dangerous to the Combine. They keep them apart, and they will write down about them. You ever start talking about Jesuitry or something in there, then you're done for pretty much. Indeed, you end up in the MI5 files. MI5 has a file on me. Once the authorities start a file on you, they never close it. But fuck it, this is a war. This is a mind war between us and the Combine, and we cannot let them win. The mind parasite that's overtaken most of society must be smashed. We truth seekers, we anti-Jesuit scholars, we are the leaders of the continuation of the Reformation. It's not, maybe I'm not preaching Christ, but I'm preaching a truth. Some sort of logos. Maybe I am preaching a Christ, a Gnostic Christ vision. And this Reformation must continue. We must destroy the Jesuit Order. We must destroy the Illuminati. And we must destroy the Combine. We must destroy the mechanical matrix that goes on and allows the Combine to work and prosper. This must all be smashed. This virus, this radioactivity, whatever you want to call it, this must be exterminated. Thank you.